Hello. Um, hello. I'm trying to. Hi.
Hey. Hi, Nelly.
Hi. Oh my God, you look so beautiful.
Thank you. It's been a
Yeah,
while. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm doing very well.
Awesome. I've also
You
been
look so
enjoying it greatly.
pretty.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank
yeah,
you.
this is
How's your day been?
exciting. Um, a lot,
It's been a
but
long day,
yes.
but you're
But
here.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me.
Thank you.
Um, you like I've always admired you from when I met you how many years ago. And just how very gracious you are.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you so much. That means a lot, actually. Thank
Yeah.
you. And I think like what you're doing is so meaningful. So like I'm so happy to, be here today, like having this conversation. I don't also do Instagram live, so like in my mind, we're having like a FaceTime call,
Yeah. That's
But
absolutely fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So shall we dive right in?
Yes, yes, yes.
Perfect. So I know that you are a qualified mental health therapist. And so for everyone listening, this is going to be highly professional advice, right? So it's not just emotions and feelings, but it's facts and data driven stuff that we are going to be sharing here today. So tell us, what is mental health, and just talk to us about mental health.
Yeah. Hi everyone. So like mental health. First of all, let me say that everybody has mental health because I feel like when you start talking about like mental health, and some people in their minds are like, God forbid, like why am I here? But just like we have like physical health, we have mental health, right? And mental health is essentially the part of your life that coordinates like your feelings, your emotions, like and how you behave as well, right? And so just kind of like the way the body functions, like when you feel healthy or you feel like you can run, that's sort of like how the mind works as well. And so mental health, the way that I like to explain it, put simply, is your ability to cope with the stress of life. And so it's not your ability to avoid stress, like,
Hmm.
so when you're going through like something difficult, like, and you feel like your world is crashing, it doesn't mean that you're not healthy, but it's actually your ability to cope with the stress that life will throw at you at any given time, right? So that's
Wow.
putting it simply.
See, already, like, I think we've already started like a mind shift thing, because like you've said that, like, so mental health is not just coping with stuff. Like, it's not just like trying to deal with like a big challenge or whatever, but it's like the everyday how you live with, and like your ability to
Right.
manage, like,
Yeah.
that's so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, a lot of people are in survival mode, and like having the healthy mental health status is beyond surviving. It's actually thriving, like
Hmm.
living life, showing up fully. So a lot of us are in survival mode, but it's just like either based off of location or what's going on in your life or your experiences. We're just surviving, but the goal is to actually thrive, like
Hmm.
show up and show out, right? So yeah.
That's, see. you said that a lot of us are in survival mode, and I think that that's very true. Because if I look back at your definition of mental health, then we're all just focused on getting by. Okay, let me just get through. But we're not focusing on actually being healthy. So when I think of like physical health, and in your definition of mental health as well, you said look at mental health like, you know how physical health is an aspect. Like you focus on your physical health. You know, if you're going to be exercising, running, whatever,
Right.
the same way like you should focus on your mental
Your
health as
mental
well.
health. Yeah.
Um, so okay, maybe tell us what's the importance of focusing on your mental health is like, your ability to cope with stress. Tell us
Mm-hmm.
why is it important that you don't just focus on maybe like your physical health or like cognitive development, but then also focus on mental health.
Yeah. So I commented on one of my friends' posts today, and I said that your mental health is like the CEO of your body, of your life. If your mind is in the right place, then you will show up the right way, right? And a lot of the times, there's so much focus on physical health, just because of the narrative. Like, if you're healthy, if you eat right, you be well, or with trends, like, if you lose weight, if you put on weight, like, there's just a lot of conversation around like the physical health. And even if you take it a little further, the fear of dying, the need to live long and a lot, right? However, with your mental health, you have to kind of think about the fact that if you are not showing up mentally well, it affects every other area of your life. So your mind and your body is connected. Your mental health is what affects how you sleep. Your mental health is what affects how you show up at work. Your mental health can affect your relationships. Your mental health can affect how driven you are in life. So I don't know if you've been in that situation where you're really anxious and next thing your tummy is like rumbling, or like if you're somebody
Exactly.
who deals with like social anxiety,
Mhm.
you start feeling the physiological reaction. So your
Yeah.
mental health actually drives a lot of the things that you do as a person, right? And
Mhm.
so it's important that we focus on our mental health, otherwise we'll come crashing down. So let me paint a scenario, because I sometimes struggle with dental issues. So I've had to do like a lot of dental procedures in my life, and absolutely traumatizing, by the way. But you know how, like, if you've ever gone through like a physical problem, like, so in this case a dental issue, there's a level you get to that you can't ignore it. Like, nobody will tell you you have to go to the dentist, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And nobody's really saying, oh, Ada, like, just get over it, like, manage, like, show up. And that's the same thing with our mental health, is that the more you ignore the signs, the more you ignore that you're actually changing, that you want to isolate, that you're not driven, that you're often thinking about, like, you're really sad, the more you
Mhm.
think about this and you ignore them, the likelihood that you could burn out. And then when you burn out, every other thing suffers. So if you are in a relationship and you're not mentally well, that could tell on your partner, that could tell on that relationship, right? If you are starting a business and you're not mentally well, that could tell on how you show up that part of your life. So it's
Yeah.
super important to not ignore your mental health, because that drives every other thing that you do as a person. Which is why, for me, I'm so happy that we're having this conversation. Yeah, go on, please.
I mean, this is so good. You know, the line where you said your mental health is the CEO of your life, like that is so big. And like I'm just, and you know, the connection you made of, if like your mind is not at rest, like sometimes when you're anxious, you even feel like a rumbling in your stomach. And so a lot of things that has to do with mental health affects like the whole,
The whole
your
body.
whole
Yeah.
body. This is such a mind shift for me, because a lot of us just think that okay, mental health is when you've gotten to the point of a struggle and you're having to come out of it. But now you're saying that you don't need to way to a point where it's a struggle, but in your
No.
everyday life, like your mental health is actually like powering the rest of your body. So the much effort
Right.
that you put into every other aspect of your life, your mental health needs that effort
Yeah.
as well.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the signs that my mental health needs attention or is declining?
Oh yeah, I like that question because sometimes especially like so I'm Nigerian and I know you're Ghanaian,
Uh-huh.
right? And so growing up in Africa, I know like when I was younger, you did watch Nollywood, right? Like so you
Mm-hmm.
watched the likes of Patience Ozoku, and
Of
it
course.
was very interesting. Because at that point, it was like Patience Ozoku in the movie, she would be like the wicked mother-in-law. And at the
Mhm.
end of the day, you're watching the movie and you're like, oh, I feel like her reward is going to be that she's going to run mad. Like, that's going to be the end of the movie. Like, she's going to lose her mind. And we grew up with the mindset of like, when you think of mental health, you're thinking of that person that's like stark raving mad on the road, right? And
Yeah.
even in Nigeria, we for a long time only had like one way of defining mental health. Like in the Yoruba language, they would say like weary, and just historically, it's like whereas like was meant to be for individuals who struggled with schizophrenia, but that's to kind of tell you the mindset that we were at, where everybody who struggled with mental health was put under one mental health disorder rather was put under one umbrella. So people
Mhm.
didn't really realize that depression was actually like mental health
Yeah.
disorder. People
Yeah.
didn't realize that anxiety is actually not anxiety can be a disorder. People
Mhm.
did not realize that people could be bipolar. And so there are so many symptoms that could be ignored when you think of like a mental health challenge. So some of the things that I would mention is not to diagnose you. So even if you say, "Oh, I think I've been expressing that since last week," it doesn't mean that you have anxiety. It doesn't mean you have depression. It's a symptom of a mental health challenge, and it's obviously worthy of like checking further. And so some of them would
Mhm.
include that a person becomes like deeply exhausted, like you're just constantly fatigued. Even when you've rested, you're just like constantly tired. An individual could also experience like a shift in their appetite. So either you're like avoiding food or you're overeating. You could also be going through a season where you're not sleeping well. So like you're either oversleeping or you're struggling with insomnia, right? Another symptom that could be easily ignored is that you're easily irritable. So every little thing is just like
Mhm.
your body's like, that could also be a symptom of like a mental health condition. Another one is that a person could be highly suicidal. So, like, either you're constantly thinking of the concept of death without a plan, or actually you have a plan, right? That could be another symptom that a person is struggling. I made some notes just because I feel like we're going to talk about this.
Uh-huh.
So, otherwise, what else am I missing out? Oh yeah, a big one is loss of interest in activities that you would typically enjoy. So if you're somebody who used to enjoy like I don't know, hanging out with your friends, and now all of a sudden you're just isolated. You're not picking up your
Mhm.
calls. You don't want to talk to people. You used to enjoy playing football. Now you're just not interested. That could also be a symptom. So I feel like sometimes we go through some of these things and we think it's just normal, but sometimes it could actually be indicative that something is going on there. And these are signs that could be easily missed. Of course, when it comes to diagnosing in a mental health world, like so if you're going to be diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and many more. You have to meet like a certain criteria. So like it then goes deeper, where like
Mhm.
with like symptoms of depression, you have to meet like a certain criteria. Like so maybe you've been experiencing like 5 symptoms in the last 2 weeks consecutively, right? So that's why I said we're not sharing this for the purpose of diagnosing. We're
Yeah.
just sharing for the purpose of like indicative knowledge that something might actually be going on there,
Yeah.
right?
This, so these are like basic things. Like I'm just, as you mentioned, like the symptoms, I'm just thinking of myself and how, like, at certain points in time, my sleep pattern will just change. And like now thinking back at it, I guess I can trace it to a significant change in something. And
Yeah.
even when you talked about like loss of interest, at a point, like I know I was talking with someone and she said it looks like you're more introverted now. And I was thinking about it, I was like, But then as we just started to talk, I realized that sometimes like even what we may think could be like a personality change or
Yeah.
something like that, if we like seek a diagnosis or something or we follow through, we would realize that it could be your mental health declining and maybe you just need to check. Ooh. So
You
when
know what, Noeli?
uh-huh.
That is so true. You know, like when you were talking, I just going back to what I said in the beginning is everybody has mental health, right? So
Mm,
just like we have physical health, it's like the way you're going to experience headache at some point in your life, you would experience, and it's not even a curse. It's like when you even go to like the World Health Organization page, you're very direct. They'll tell you that at some point in your life you will experience a mental health challenge, and it's sort of like what we also go through in our physical world, where at some point you might experience malaria or typhoid, and that's just kind of
mm-hmm.
like how our mental health is, because at some point in your life something might happen that would trigger that reaction.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I really like, I validate what you're saying because I experienced it as well, where it's like you go through seasons and your body is telling you that something is going on here, you have to take care of yourself, you have to set boundaries and all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you mentioned like diagnosing, like getting a diagnosis. You can't just look at the symptoms and say, "Oh, I feel this, I have this, and I have this." And I'm thinking of it wasn't till recently, maybe a couple of years ago, that people started to get a diagnosis, or we even started to realize that mental health is a part of our lives that we should take care of.
Right.
So if I wanted to get a diagnosis, what do I do?
So I think the first place might be, so if you already have a primary care physician, you could be, referred to a psychiatrist. You could be referred to a clinical psychologist to be able to get a diagnosis. So that's sort of like, where your history is being gathered,
Mhm.
you're being guided to like understand what the mental health illness is and how it relates to what your symptoms have been. So yeah, if you have a doctor, like a family doctor, you can have that conversation with them.
Mhm.
I know that sometimes mental health is not easily accessible, even though like a lot of work is being done to like push it. So for some people, it's like, I'm even saying, oh, talk like your medical doctor could refer you to a psychiatrist. And I know like a family member that I said that to recently was just like, God forbid,
Yeah.
I'm not going to a psychiatrist. But it's like it's not as scary as it sounds. I promise. It's just like you have a conversation. You're being guided to understand what you could be going through, and then the next point of care that could be available to you as well.
To be honest, when you said, you go to your primary health care giver and then maybe you speak to a psychiatrist, I won't lie. In my mind, psychiatrist is for like when you're mad or like when you're really, really mental. So what you're saying
Yeah.
is speaking to a psychiatrist doesn't mean that you're mad.
No.
And then even paying attention to your mental health doesn't mean you're mad. But
Yeah,
I
and we
think what
also like
Mhm.
even recently have just found out that like to say that people are mad is even like something that we're trying to run away from. So we say that people are like struggling with their mental health, just like we would say people are struggling with their physical health, or that
Mm,
they're dealing with that challenge, right? So again, it's one of the cultures that we're trying to like guide people to, because somebody will say, so are you trying to say that I'm not okay? God forbid. And going back to that culture thing,
mm-hmm.
the stigma thing, which hopefully we'll talk
Yeah.
about, the religious part of ourselves that hinders us from getting the care that we need. But yeah, going back to what you said, no, talking to a psychiatrist is not, you could be a psychiatrist, I could be a psychiatrist, right? Like there are people who go to medical school and focus on the mental health bit of it. That's
Mhm.
essentially what it is. So like the way you have your gynecologist, you have your pediatrician, that's the same way you have your psychiatrist, right?
Right. Okay, perfect. Before we come into talking about like the stigma and the cultural and religious aspect, um, so for me as a woman, would you say that there are hormonal influences to my mental health care. Like, so like when a woman is menstruating or about to have a period, it's like, oh, you have mood swings, that kind of thing. Can you talk to us a bit about that, and what does that have to do with our mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about hormones for a bit. Hormones are like chemical messengers in the body. So everybody has hormones. Actually, they do a good job. Like they're supposed to help you like regulate your body, send
Mm-hmm.
messages from your brain, and not to go highly medical, so that we can all get an understanding of it. But as a woman, we go through different phases. We go through like either pregnancy, or you go through like postpartum, or you go through like the menstrual phase, then you go through like premenstrual
Mm-hmm.
and the luteal phase. So there are a lot of changes, and we only have 4 weeks in a month, and it's like every month is dedicated to something, you
Yeah.
know. And I was looking at a post and somebody said, when do we get a break? Like when does it end?
Uh-huh.
But going back to your question, just for us to understand it biologically and also give grace to yourself, um, there are a few different hormones. So I will focus on just a few of them. So one of them is the estrogen, and your estrogen is supposed to be like your happy hormone, like your feel good hormone. So you see
Mm-hmm.
the irony, it's like it's the
Yeah.
hormone that actually should help you feel like good, regulate your mood, make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you're okay mood wise.
Right.
But when you are actually at that premenstrual phase, you might experience a drop in your estrogen, and it's like a normal chemical reaction. So when you
Uh-huh.
really understand what goes on in the woman's
Yeah.
body before the period and after the period and during the period, you see that there are a lot of changes, and that's the estrogen also controls, like, why the drop in the estrogen also explains why a woman could be bloated, or why she could be like easily irritable before her period comes, or
Mm-hmm.
why sometimes she could be lethargic and really just tired. And so when there is a drop in that estrogen, sometimes the mood
Mm-hmm.
then becomes dysregulated, because remember that the estrogen controls the mood regulation.
Right.
So now it's your happy hormone, and when it drops, it can explain why you would experience some symptoms of depression and sadness. And
Mm-hmm.
then let's also remember that we have the premenstrual symptoms, but there are also women who deeply struggle with like the premenstrual like disorder, like,
Okay.
and sometimes that's not really the regular premenstrual like pain that people go through. Sometimes a
Mm-hmm.
lot deeper than that when we go into that. So the hormone is in charge of that, and that's why sometimes when people don't give grace to themselves, like you're going through that period and you're feeling like you're changing your mood, and you're really like, your sleep pattern is messed up.
Mm-hmm.
It's important that you understand what is going on with you, right? I also want to talk about the cortisol hormone, which is like the stress hormone. And these hormones I'm talking about, they're not peculiar to women, but like for instance, the estrogen, women have more of that than men,
Okay.
because again, women will also go through the menstrual cycle, men do not. But these are things that you could find in both genders, but we're specifically talking about women in relation to like what we experience monthly, right?
Right.
But also the cortisol level is known as your stress hormone. So it helps you kind of like regulate your stress level. It helps you respond properly. However, when you're faced with danger, so as a woman, you wear many hats. Like you're a wife, you're a daughter, you're an auntie, you are a professional. If you have kids, you're a mother, and
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes we juggle a lot of things, right? And we're
Yeah.
constantly in the superhero mood of like, oh, I need to show up, I need to do
Right.
this.
Right.
And so if you're not careful, your cortisol level, which is your stress hormone, could be increasing. And so this is a really very good way to kind of explain how our mental health can be connected to our physical health. Because when you're constantly in that state of like stress, like heightened stress, for a lot of people, it could even explain the cause of cancer. It could explain like a lot of like immunal like disorder that we experience.
Mm.
Because imagine if you're constantly in a state of like fear or flight, like should I, like, when you're faced with danger, you're kind of like, should I fight, should I not? Your pupils are dilated, your heart is racing fast, Now imagine constantly being in a state of like stress that is really
Wait,
high. Your
quick
cortisol
question, quick
level,
question, quick question.
yeah,
Is fear of flight and mental health issue?
it's a response. No, it's not a mental health disorder. It's a
Okay,
response.
because
It's
I was gonna say, oh my god.
no, it's a response, right? But if we are constantly there, which is why
Mhm,
people preach like self care and a lot of things to actually make you realize that you need to relax, you need to like take care of yourself because hormonally your body is producing like stress hormones. If you're always stressed, if you feel like, oh no, I can do it all, oh no, don't worry, self care is not for me. Like in my village, people don't do that and they're okay.
mhm,
But what we don't know is that constantly exposing yourself to a high level of stress, it actually breaks down your defense, like your immunal defense mechanism. And those are some of the things that protect you from falling sick, right?
mhm.
So the more you are constantly like stressed, the more your cortisol level is high, and the more likely you could break down with an illness. And so sometimes that explains why some women would actually go through some medical explanations that are not necessarily as a result of like just biology, but also like your mental health being attacked, right?
Right. Yeah. That makes so much sense because you know how you said in the beginning that like see your mental health as the CEO of your body. So that if anything is going wrong, it can always be traced back to, management level. Like the CEO is like at the head of everything. I love that analogy
Yeah,
so much.
yeah.
Um, so can you give us like daily practicable things or steps to take to maintain, how do I say it? To maintain good levels of mental health? Yeah.
Yeah, take care of your mental health.
Yeah.
For starters, I like to go back, excuse me, I like to go back to the basics, right? How are you sleeping? How are you eating? So remember that when we talked about the symptoms of like a mental health challenge or like how do you
Hmm.
know you're struggling, the first things you would notice are the basic things begin to suffer, like
Right.
your sleep pattern, your eating pattern.
Hmm.
So for you to be able to go back to regular programming, it's important to go back to the basics for starters. How are you sleeping? How can you improve your sleep hygiene? What is your bedtime routine like? If you're somebody who's not sleeping well enough and you're struggling with insomnia, what are some of the things that could help? And sometimes it could even be like your vitamins, like are there things that you can do, your diet, that can help you improve that? Can you change your bed sheet? Can you change your nightstand? If
Louder.
you're somebody who struggles with like those little actionable things, like even sometimes changing your shower, like your soap, like make it something that makes you feel good so that you can sleep better.
Mm,
um Reducing your screen time before bedtime can also help your sleep habits, right? And then what about food? Like how are you eating? Sometimes our natural response to stress is not eating in a healthy way, so maybe taking a lot of sugar, a lot of carbonated drink, or avoiding food entirely. So going back to that, like how can you up your nutrients? Because those things are also helpful with like
mm,
ensuring like that you're well, right? Staying hydrated as well is something that can be helpful. So those are like the basics, right? Now, moving further, how can we take care of ourselves? Rest, take breaks. Like as a woman, sometimes there's like the tendency to like, want to show up and show out, and that's good. But being aware, like actually checking in with your body, when do you need to slow down? Like it's literally as direct as you're walking too fast, like you're holding your breath, you're not breathing. Like, can you drop your shoulder and actually take in a deep breath? Like sometimes I might be like, I really struggle when I'm keeping people waiting. Like I get anxious. And just even being aware that, oh, I just like you're anxious right now. Can you stop and breathe? Like it's
mm.
okay. So being aware daily of what your body is telling you is super important as well.
Yeah.
Another way that we can actually take care of ourselves is by being gracious. Like be kind to yourself. So now today we've talked about the hormones and what goes on in your body. We've talked about the fact that a lot of the symptoms that you might be going through and you're kind of worried, like, will people understand? Like, I'm having suicidal ideation. Will people understand? Like, can I
Mm-hmm.
share that with somebody? Or I've not really been motivated to work and now I feel so guilty. I feel like a failure. Will anybody understand? The shame that we carry daily, that I've committed to this and I've committed to that, but look at me, in the past 1 month, I haven't done that. I'm such a failure. And those are literally the conversations that we have sometimes in our minds. And we're not really talking about it, but we're dealing with them. We're struggling with it, right? And so being aware of like your inner voice, like what are the conversations going on in your mind? Are they kind? Are they conversations that encourage you or they make you feel like you're even more of a failure? So being aware and extending grace and kindness to yourself, because today we've talked about the fact that just like you would develop a headache, sometimes you might go through a season where you're demotivated. And that's something that being aware of that is really telling you that, okay, Noelle, like, to do something. Maybe you've been at home a lot. Like,
Yeah.
can you, like, maybe, can you get up? Can you do something? Can you talk to somebody? And that brings me to the next point, is that we're not meant to do life alone
Mm-hmm.
as people, as humans, as women. We're not meant to do life alone. So there's blessing in community. And so, if you're struggling, and when we say struggling, we're not even talking about the big things. Like, we don't need to wait till we get there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you need to have like conversations around your career, if you need to have conversations around your relationships, if you need to have conversations around your spiritual journey, whatever it may be, even if you consider it small, like, it's important that you have those conversations with people that you
Right.
trust in your community. Therapy is also something that can help. I know that for a lot of people, there's still a lot of shame, and I think we're actually getting better. Like, people are getting to the point where like they can actually confidently say, "Oh, I have a therapist. Like, I'm in therapy," and that's so cool
I mean, I guess
because
now it sounds cool. It's starting to sound cool if you have a therapist. But then there's still a lot of, because there are lots of people that I talk to, especially young people, and they feel like, why am I telling my business to a stranger? You know?
yeah, I agree. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of receiving to be done by people as well. But I think like therapy is definitely helpful. Not everybody has so your family members can play family roles to you and offer you social support, which is something we highly encourage in the mental health field, where it's like that support is actually meaningful. But beyond that, there are certain things that your family members might not be able to do, right? So for a person, let me give an example. Let's say somebody is struggling with hallucination and you are talking to a family member about it. Now, you could be blessed with having family members who are saying, "Oh, this is not normal. I think we need to take you to the hospital or we need to
Mm-hmm.
refer you to a professional." But you could also find yourself in a situation where people are saying, "Shut up, like, nobody must know that. That's a taboo, that's shameful." And then the more you have that, right? So that's why therapy is also good, because it offers you a safe place where there's no judgment, where you can get like people who have actually gone through education and understand what it is that you're going through. So you no longer have to live with the burden of, will anybody understand? Like, how
Right.
will it sound, right? And so therapy is also something that I highly encourage. You don't have to do it alone. Like, so even if it's not therapy, like, talk to somebody. I think it really starts by talking. Like, in my practice, I've had a lot of people refer their friends to therapy, refer their family members, and that's offering like a safe place where it's like, I know that I can't be that person for you, but
Mm-hmm.
I can guide you to get the help that you need, right? So definitely important as well. Yeah.
I like that you emphasize that your family members and your friends can play a social support role, but they cannot be your therapists. You need to get professional help. You need to
Yeah.
um so I have a question, but before that, someone put a question in the question box here.
Okay.
So the person is asking um so a lot of, okay, so the person is basically saying that they don't exercise a lot, but they've realized that when they do exercise, they feel better and their mood is also better. Is there any, so okay, I guess the question is there any scientifically proven correlation between working out and mental health, like your mood?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, that's one of the points that I like to share. That working out and exercising is also like a practical way to improve your mental health. And there's evidence to prove that, you know, when we talked about hormones earlier on, that your hormones actually play a role in regulating your body. They play different roles. So when you exercise, you actually release some hormones.
Uh-huh.
Like, so when you exercise, first of all, you reduce the cortisol hormone that we talked about earlier,
Right.
which is your stress hormone. And then you also release some hormones known as the dopamine, which is like in charge of like reward. So that dopamine is like also a feel good hormone that makes you feel like I've done something. You know, it's almost like it controls like the reward cycle of, so you know, when you maybe you pass an examination or you do
Mm-hmm.
something you're really proud of, you know, that feeling like your shoulder is like going high. There's a hormone in charge of that. And
Right.
when people exercise, actually, they release some hormones naturally. So it's like you don't even have to take alcohol or any of those things that might not be good for you. Like your body actually releases some feel good hormones.
Right.
And you experience that sometimes, like a lot of the times when you work out, when you exercise, when you go running, when you dance. So exercising now, I know there's a culture of people going to the gym, and if you have access to that, definitely do that. But we can actually exercise by buying a skipping rope and skipping. Like, you know, you could play the music and dance. You could take a walk and tell yourself that you're going to just enjoy the cool air and walk, right? So those are things that are super helpful. And finally, when you're exercising, sometimes your mind is hyper focused on what it is that you're doing in that present moment, that it's actually a little harder for you to think of the problems that you were thinking of when you were just sitting down on your bed doing
Uh-huh.
nothing. So if you don't take anything away from this conversation, and if you're somebody just listening right now and you've been considering like working out, not just for the aesthetics, but actually now know that working out can do a lot for your mind as well, you know, and the aesthetics is a plus, so definitely why not? But yeah.
Yeah. Um, so since the questions are coming, I think we'll take a few questions before I go back to my
Sure.
line of question. So this person is saying, so she has three kids. And when you talked about women wearing many hats, and then now you talking about the different things that you can do, she's asking, how do I incorporate my children as part of my mental health routine? Is
Mm,
that
okay.
something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it depends on, you know, if I understand the question correctly, but from the way that I heard it, like how can she, with the life that she has, how can she make something healthy out of what might be already a stressful situation for
Yeah.
her? Right. I think that's a good question, and that's a lot of people's reality. So, first of all, congrats on your beautiful children. One thing that I will share before I share like another practical thing is that a lot of the times when we're overwhelmed with stress, the things that are blessings for us are our minds, because again, remember, we're having conversations around the mind. The mind
Hmm.
can play a quick one on you where you're so overwhelmed that it might be hard to see how your life can still be the way you want it to be, regardless of, because life will change,
Hmm.
definitely it won't be the same. And you know, one video that I watched a while ago where the lady said that she's learned to reframe her language. So instead of saying, "Oh, I'm so tired, like I can barely do nothing for myself," it's changing that language to say that I'm so blessed to be able to take care of these three children. I'm so grateful that I get to be the one doing this for them. And even though that doesn't take away the pain of the reality that she can't just up and go and do the things she wants to do, but that's one of the things that's saving her through motherhood, to be able to reframe and change the language. But that's, by the way, I just wanted to throw
That's
that out
actually
there.
so good. That's so good. Thank you.
Thank you. But I'll also say that routine is super helpful. So like even if you have three kids, like developing a routine for them and figuring out like how can I make the best of the schedule. So like either when you are at work, like creating an alone time for yourself during your break time, or when your kids go to school, can you take like 30 minutes in that day to like do something that you've been wanting to do for yourself? Or even with your children, can you develop like a, so it's about creating a routine. And even though the routine might not be perfect, you kind of like your mind. So when people deal with like stress and depression, one of the things that we actually preach is to have a routine. Like do something, like know when you're going to be doing something, and also get help if you need help. If you don't have help already, like outsource a couple of things if you can, so you don't have to do it all. You know, sometimes there's a lot of fear because the world is also risky and dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like I have to be the one doing this. But if there are certain things you can get help for, I highly encourage that. But if that question was not answered in the way that you asked it, please feel free to rephrase, and
Yeah.
I'll be happy to readdress. But yeah.
Um, there's an interesting question here. So this is, I assume this person is male,
Okay.
because the person is asking, why are you focusing on just stuff for women? Can you talk to the men as well?
Yeah. Noelle, please, you have to answer that. But you know what?
So,
Like I was just gonna say that I can like a lot of the things that I'm sharing actually apply to men as well. It's essentially for the purpose of the fact that this was in celebration of like the International Women's Day, which happened in
exactly.
March. But also, it's great that you answered that, because the hope that Noelle and I had for this conversation is that everybody feels included. So even as a man, it can work for you. But also, if you have a girlfriend, if you have a wife, if you have daughters, these are things that you can also understand to be able to be a caregiver and support them. But just bear in mind that everything I talked about, like the mental health signs that you could easily ignore, everything literally applies to men. But you know, for the hormones, we just tried to like highlight how it affects women in that
Yeah,
way.
this is actually so good. So you touched a bit on the cultural influences of, how women perceive mental health. Can you talk a bit more about that? Like, how has culture played? So I don't want to preempt the answer. So I'm just going to ask
Oh, you
it.
can if you like. Actually, you know you're Ghanaian and I'm Nigerian, so it would be like an interesting, like, to see if we're like the same people, because I feel like we live the same
We
lives.
do,
But yeah,
we do. I mean, obviously, apart from our jollof, but let's not go there.
let's
Um,
go there. I'm happy to
but
meet you
yeah, so
there. Yeah, go on.
our culture, our culture, and you already mentioned how women have to do so many things, wear so many hats, and even the idea of talking about your personal issue to someone else, it feels very taboo to, oh, I feel like I'm overwhelmed. For example, in Ghana, okay, well, Africa, because we're all the same, Nigeria and Ghana. The culture demands that a woman should be able to do so many things. A woman should be able to be a mother, to go to work, be a wife. If it's a business she runs, like have a side gig and all of that. And then now,
Yeah.
even popular culture places a demand on women to be so many things, and I think for me, one of the reasons why the mental health conversation is very important is because and I like how you started off by saying that the whole mental health thing, see it as CEO of your life, CEO of your whole body, right? So understanding that if even as a woman you're going to be doing all these things like you said, if you focus on where is the central part that flows into every other part, that's great for you. Like that will ensure that your whole life. And I like the example you gave of, like, when you're even anxious, your stomach starts to rumble, like you feel it in your stomach. um what would you say is a way to overcome some of these cultural limitations?
Yeah, I think that's super valid. I think like when you think about it on the surface, it just sounds like it's just culture, it's just mental health, but people have lost their lives, people have lost themselves, a lot of children, a lot of partners, so whether male or female even, have lost their partners, right? In the spirit of trying to be strong, in the
Mm-hmm.
spirit of trying to be resilient. Like you rightly said, somebody will tell you that your grandmother did it and then your mother did it. So what is wrong with your generation? Why won't you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that there's so much power in seeking help. You don't have to do it all by yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's different. So you could have a friend who is juggling everything and looks like a superhero, but then also know that you're different, right? So when you think of like mental health challenges, one person will deal with like anxiety at some point, and another person is struggling with depression, and another person is struggling with something else, an eating disorder, a sleep disorder. And so that's the dynamic of life. We're not the same people. And so comparison or
Mm-hmm.
resilience, I need to do all by myself. Being aware that that is not even normal. The normal thing that used to be doesn't have to be your own normal, right? You can be true to yourself about who you are. What does your life look like? People have children who struggle with like different issues. Like people have neurodivergent children, people have children who have ADHD, who need more care because they're very energetic sometimes, or they struggle academically, or they are very talented and they need a lot of like support in school, and you need to take them for sports, and they need to play the keyboard and a couple of other things, right? So the comparison that we do sometimes is very surface level, where we're just like, after all, I'm a mother. This person has 4 children. I only have one. Why can't I do what she's doing? But we're not all the same people, right? And so that's one thing that I want to say. When it also comes to culture, sometimes we can't deny the religious factor where
Mm-hmm.
people feel a lot of shame around even saying that they deal with a mental health condition. Like, are
Yeah.
you not a Christian? Are you not a Muslim? Can't you pray? Like, have you prayed about it? Don't say you deal with anxiety. You have to, like, and one thing that I like to tell people is that even Jesus was called the great counselor. And so, like, dealing with mental health challenges doesn't make you a bad spiritual person. And now I'm saying that because, not just Christians, but everybody else who believes in a higher power.
Yeah.
So the whole culture of praying about it is like when people are diagnosed with like a medical condition, you don't just tell them to pray it away. You pray with them even when they're seeking the care, like the help that they need. People are taking medications and saying, I pray that this medication helps me, because self-care and taking care of your mental health is not just luxury, it's actually scientific to do because
Mm-hmm.
of everything that we've talked about
Yeah.
that goes on with your biology, right? So the strong woman's idea, the fear of being judged, the need to be resilient and do it all, I think it all starts with knowledge, right? Your question was, how do we take care of that, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, it starts with the knowledge that whether it be like your fear of being like compared to the other person, own your truth, like know that, oh, you can't be the one that comes back from work by 9 p.m. and then you're probably going to be able to cook at 9 p.m. or do laundry for the next day. Sometimes you might need to
Mm-hmm.
outsource. And it's really deeply rooted in our culture where it's like, when did all of this start? When did women start doing this? When did women start doing that, right? And remember that I said, like, it can be very detrimental where you actually want to be alive and be healthy for the people that you're actually doing all of this for. Another thing is to have something that pours into you. So culture really, like, as a woman, you're like, you give and you give, you're a caregiver, you take care of your family, you nurture, you're a
Mm-hmm.
nurturer. But we kind of forget the element of you can't give from an empty barrel. So who is pouring into you? How are you pouring into yourself? So if you're a woman who used to go, like, you used to work out, and then now, like, for example, the lady who has 3 kids, there might be elements of her life that she's had to sacrifice because of the new role. But are there ways that you can incorporate it into your life? It might not be as straightforward as it used to be, but is there a way to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what else can we say about culture? Really, other things that I think also just even with medication and therapy, not just therapy, but even medication. I know
Mm-hmm.
personally a lot of people are really afraid to go to the doctor to talk about their mental health because they feel like, oh, I don't really understand the whole concept of taking an antidepressant or an anxiety pill, but a lot of the times these things are actually can be helpful if they are prescribed by a doctor. And so you
Mm.
kind of need to treat it the way you treat your physical health. The whole stigma that comes around, like, oh, if I take this medication, won't I become addicted? Will I know what I'm doing? Like, we need to trust that the person recommending that medication to you has gotten an education, just like he would help you if you were dealing with a physical condition, and just get the help that you need,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. um, is what I would encourage. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes some of the um, misconceptions that come with like mental health, I don't even want to say the wrong thing, but like the misconceptions that come with paying attention to your mental health or taking care of your mental health um stems from like our cultural background. And so I think as we evolve and things change, we should also begin to change our perspective.
yeah,
And I like something that you said. Actually, I like so many things that you said, but one of the things that you said that really stood out to me was you're different from another person. So as you're seeing another person be able to juggle so many things, you don't know what is behind the scenes for them. So be
yeah,
gracious with yourself and realize that you are different. And then you also said that like the normal that you're used to doesn't
yeah,
have to be your own normal. So if you're used to your grandma did this, your mom did this, like it's different generations, different
right,
dispensations. Do what you believe works for you. Um
yeah.
and and then you also said that you can't pour from an empty barrel. Like you can't be empty and be giving, giving, giving. You also need to find ways to like refill yourself. And I like when you talk to us about the self care. You started from like the basic things. Like, hey, are you sleeping? Do you have a sleep routine? What does your sleep look like? Are you eating properly? Like even things like vitamins,
Yeah,
screen time, because a lot of us stay on our phones the whole time. But that's absolutely great. I also want to be very respectful of your time. So maybe we'll take a few more questions.
yeah.
But so when you talk about getting help and you can outsource certain things and you don't need to do things by yourself, how can we create a support system as women for ourselves in a way that will be beneficial to our mental health?
Mm, First of all, like what we're doing, like having conversations around mental health. Like we've probably said mental health like 100 times. So it's like, okay, hopefully we're not as scared about that concept again. I think like embracing conversations, having conversations when people like come up to you and say that they're struggling, like validating what they're feeling, like not being that person who is just like, "Ooh, don't say it loud, somebody might hear you,"
Mhm.
right? But also like welcoming those conversations, educate people. Like if you're somebody who has knowledge about, like maybe you have witnessed somebody struggle with a mental health challenge and you know that that is true, like educate other people who will be in a position where they're just like, that's not like that doesn't exist. So be a conversation starter, be somebody who educates people, um be a listener as well. Like if you have people who you feel like they need to listen, be the person that actually listens. Don't be that person that's like, oh no, you're not the only one. Like even me, and then you take it off and then it becomes your own
Mm,
conversation. So creating a safe place for other people. Again, we mentioned that sisterhood is important because we're not meant to do life alone or in isolation. And a lot of the things that we experience, we can, like when I talked about, the fact that we have four weeks in a month, and then every week, like as a woman, you're going through something. That's something that you can relate to, and I can
Yeah.
relate to, right? So we have like shared experience. So even just like creating time to do other things, like if you are somebody who enjoys something, like inviting somebody else for something that could be saving that person's life, even if it just seems very little, you know.
Yeah.
And then what else can we do? We can also be a resource. So I know that sometimes people might not have information. Like let's say you have like a helpline, you know somebody is struggling with something, and you can like share like maybe a crisis line. So also be that person that has that information, right? Not just for yourself, but because somebody that you know might need that or might be struggling. But I
Mhm.
would say like sisterhood is important and vulnerability. So like if I can share with you, then it gives you room to also like be vulnerable with me, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think sometimes people always have this negative conversation of like, oh, women can't be friends, women are not great friends, but women are great friends and they can be. And so it's important that we also like recognize that we can be each other's keeper as well. But like even from your end, are there things that you feel like women can do for each other? Like maybe if you have like female friendship groups, like are there things you feel like you benefited from as a person within the friendship groups with women?
Um, yeah, for me, I definitely have like, so there's a community I belong to of women, and we do like accountability. And then so accountability partners, basically, like what we do is you have, for a period of time, you have somebody who you most likely don't know because it's a large group. And so you're supposed to get to know this person. And then as you do, you're responsible for sharing like goals. So we have like different types of goals: health goals, career, physical, all those things. And then you're responsible for building a relationship that helps you both to maintain or achieve like the goals that you want to. And I find that very useful because sometimes when you talk to women, like you said, who have similar experiences as you, they're able to share how they coped, or how they, went through that situation. And then, even if it may not make sense in your context, it kind of gives you an idea of how
Yeah,
you can also like tackle that particular issue. So I definitely think that like sisterhood is very important. I don't believe in this thing of women don't support women.
yeah,
Like for example, me reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, this is what I want to do, and I know that you're in the mental health space. Can you do this?"
yeah,
And I mean, we know what has gone on behind the scenes before we could make it here today. And so I
right,
see that you really support what I'm doing. You want to encourage what I'm doing, and then also you want to contribute to knowledge that women will have. So I think
right,
maybe like breaking the mindsets and ideology that women are not a safe space. Um,
yeah,
we should do away with that because women
absolutely,
really are supportive. Women are supportive. I mean, obviously
yeah,
there are anomalies and extremes, but then women are supportive. And I think even with the whole Women's International Women's Day celebration, is to highlight how can we fast track how much we're helping each other. So
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
exists. It's just how can we fast track it?
yeah,
And when you talk about when you talked about being vulnerable, I really like that because um, I think that because men and women are different in a lot of ways, women think it's very easy to be vulnerable with men. But then there's also that gender clash of, sometimes people say, "Oh, I just wanted him to listen to me." But then a woman kind of understands what you're going through. And like we've said, once you open up, once someone opens up to you, you too be willing to open up. And
yeah,
there's so much that you can both benefit from each other. And
yeah,
then the last thing I want to say is I really think that women are the best people to champion women things because we understand what's happening to us. We understand what's going on. Like if I called a man to ask him about mental health and say he talks about hormones, and yes, you talked about hormones excellently, but you were able to give a touch of experience of, when you have your menses, you were able to talk about like all through the month, it's like something is happening with your hormones, right? A man may not be able to give that context. It will be largely informational or based on education. So I think that women are the best people to champion women's causes. There is a
Yeah.
question. I'm sorry, I know
Okay.
that we've hit the hour,
No
but
problem.
there's a question. Oh, I'm trying to see it. Okay, so this person is asking for resources. Like, can you share? Is there, okay? So the person said, you mentioned like helpline and stuff like that. Are there things that you can share for somebody who is wanting to talk to someone about their mental health or find out something? I
Yeah.
think, yeah, if you have some to share, you can. I don't have any resources, but that's something we can look up and then share later. But go ahead.
Yeah. No, we can. And I'm not going to share like specific names, but I'll guide you on how you can do that. So if you went on the internet, like depending on what part of the world you're in, there's
Uh-huh.
so many different resources. So you could have access to online therapy, you could have access to in-person therapy. You could, like I said, you could start from a doctor. Like, so sometimes people might not have a mental health professional in their life, but they have like a medical doctor who can refer them depending on like where you are. If you have somebody who is in need of like crisis intervention, so
Mhm.
like you're kind of like at that point where you can't even wait for the next meeting, you feel like you need immediate help, either because you're scared that a loved one is going to hurt themselves, or you're in a position where you could hurt yourself, or you're deeply dealing with like maybe a like anxiety disorder or something like
Mhm.
that. You can just quickly Google like crisis intervention line and then add your country. So for like Nigeria, there is like one, like Mani provides one, and then there are a few other organizations that provide crisis intervention around the world. So there's a phone number on there. When you Google on the internet, it's going to pop up so you can call. Another thing is, if for some people finance is also an issue, but even beyond finance, so if you work in an organization, there's also like employee assistance program that
Okay.
different companies offer. And it's already paid for, but a lot of people don't even know, so they don't make use of it. So you can talk to your HR, or even if you don't want your HR to know, just kind of like figure out like, okay, what organizations are under your company's profile. And then if you're a student in the university, your university would often have a counseling department that can offer you therapy. I also want to say, I know that for a lot of people that work in organizations, they have the fear that, since it's my company offering this, like is my business going to be out there? No, ethically, the employee assistant program still respects your confidentiality. So nobody's going to know that you even had like a session on what you talked about, because your therapist is outside of the organization. So it's kind of like the way we have the medical insurance, like for you to be able to
Right.
go to the medical doctor. That's kind of like how it works. And then finally, there are also like lots of NGOs around the world that offer support to people. So I know that even in Nigeria, we have a couple of NGOs for like people who have gone through like sexual abuse, or people who need aid. Like, let's say you don't work in a company that offers like free mental health aid, but you're also struggling financially to be able to pay. There are a couple of organizations that are NGOs that offer like mental health assistance, already
Mhm.
paid for. So there are a couple of resources, right? We just kind of like need to check, ask, depending on where you are
Yeah.
around the world.
So there's someone tuned in, and the person just recommended a service that they have used. This is in Ghana. So it's Mind It Ghana. Yeah, Mind It, Mindit. And the person says like they're telehealth organization, NGO. So it will be like a toll-free number where you call, and then you'll get to speak with someone who can assist you
Yeah,
moving forward.
yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. And also like beyond this, like if you are in Nigeria, I do like have some openings. I could take on a few clients in the events that you have like recommendations, or you're the person needing care or you need consultation, and that's through like my mental health organization, Mind Dots. So I think like we'll just tag it on the
Yes.
caption of the video or something, so you can easily check that out. But yeah.
All right, perfect. This has really been great. You are full of wisdom. Like you know your stuff. When you
Yay!
started
Great.
and you said your mind is the CEO of your body, you had me there. You had me there. Yeah, this has been so good. Like
Thank
even for
you.
me, I've really learned a lot, and I was taking notes. I
Oh,
really, really
nice.
learned a lot. And I'm going to highlight a lot of the things she said and then just continue to share with others.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much
much.
for doing
Thank
this
you
with
for what you're
me.
doing. Like, I really like. It's just crazy because I know like you have to do your personal daily stuff, and then like on I think it's Wednesday and Fridays, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
here with people having conversations. I
Yeah.
like how I hope you're taking care of yourself, but like. Otherwise, like I think it's great stuff, and the fact that you can save it and people can watch it like throughout the year and next year, like it's just so meaningful. So
Yes.
more grace to your elbows.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was absolutely fun. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you everyone for joining. It was so nice to have everyone here. Thank you for
Yes.
contributing to our conversation as well.
Yes. Thank you so well. A number of people joined and we're just giving you hearts. I don't think
Oh
you saw it, but yeah, they
no,
were
I
giving
can't see
you
it from my
hearts.
end. Thank
Okay,
you
all
so
right.
much,
Thank
guys. All right.
you. Thank you.
All the best,
Thank you
Nelly. Take
so much.
care. I'm gonna
Bye.
see if it will let me leave. If not, you can kick me out.
Okay. Yes, thank you all for joining. Yeah, this was absolutely educative, very, very, very educative. And so the first thing that I'll say is my biggest takeaway from this is number one, your mind and your mental health is the CEO of your body. And so make sure that you're taking care of your mind and your mental health. Yeah. Thank you all.